Okay, well now we have someone else who's a good friend and an incredible chef at a restaurant called Fred's. And Danielle Alvarez has got an incredible story. I'm not going to tell it, she's going to tell it. So a warm round of applause for Danielle, please.
Testing?
Yeah,
there we go.
Beautiful.
Hello, hi.
So, Danielle, what an incredible story there.
Oh, well, I'm inspired. Oh my God, I could listen to Maggie Beer talk all afternoon.
Yeah, but you have an incredible story because you're an incredible chef and you know, like Maggie, you're produce-driven, it's clean, it's simple, and in fact, I went to your restaurant a couple of weeks ago and all of a sudden I get this roast chook put in front of me and said, can you try this? We're just playing around with this roast chook. And I had it, and it was one of the most beautiful roast chickens I've ever had in my life. And, you know, sometimes I just wonder how it gets to all that. So tell us how you started and you know, where you got into things.
I think I, like Maggie, didn't start out thinking that cooking was what I was going to make of my career. I did grow up in a home where food was so important, and family gatherings around a table was like, and what we were going to make for those gatherings was so important. So I always had the love of it. But I went to university and studied art history. So, you know, unrelated, but now I see how it all connects for kind of this love of beautiful things. And it was after I finished school and I started working in the art world, and it kind of wasn't doing it for me. And I spent all my time, all my free time, and any money I had going to great restaurants and cooking at home. And it was
why did that, with family upbringing? Or?
Yeah, I think it was just family, and I'd say, like, you know, this was also the beginning of, you know, like food TV, which I think it's strange to say that was such an influence, but sort of seeing all these great cooking shows. And, you know, I grew up with my grandmother watching episodes of Julia Child's cooking, and you know, she loved it. She would show me like the old New York Times cookbook, the original first one, and we'd like pick things and cook out of them. You know, I remember one of my fondest memories of my grandmother was her teaching me how to make crepes. You know, and I just thought she was brilliant because she could do that. And I guess it's all of those little things that eventually create the kind of cook that you're going to be. And I knew that it was something that I loved, and I wanted. How
old were you then when you realized that?
Well, that would have been my early 20s, and then that's when I decided to go to culinary school because I hadn't done any training. I actually had never even worked in a restaurant, so it was a total leap of faith to go into cooking school. And then I, you know, as part of that, I needed to get an internship, and I wrote a letter to the French Laundry in the U.S., which was at the time, you know, and still really is one of the best.
Thomas Keller, a very famous
one
chef.
of the best restaurants in the country. Wrote a letter and said I wanted to come and learn and work, and they offered me the internship, and that really started me, I think.
You didn't want to go to a little cafe. You went to one of the best restaurants in the world.
I mean, I guess shoot for the stars, right? So I went there to California, and it was really the place of California and being so close to incredible produce that really, you know, set me in that direction of then seeking out produce, you know, like Maggie talks about. That really became my inspiration. So French Laundry was incredible, and I learned a lot of great technique and about, you know, being very disciplined. But I wanted to be more connected to the produce, and I wanted to cook a little more soulfully, which changed my path a little bit.
So where did you go after the French Laundry?
So after French Laundry, I stayed in San Francisco. Well, I worked in the Napa Valley a little bit, and then in San Francisco. But I'd say the kind of light bulb moment, or the place where cooking really, all the pieces kind of connected, was Chez Panisse in Berkeley, which is founded by an incredible woman chef named Alice Waters, who's a total visionary, and I think changed the face of food in the U.S. for sure, but I think played a part globally in reconnecting us to the source of where food comes from, and cooking seasonally and cooking simply. And I had the best 4 years of my life cooking there. It was incredible.
And would you say having a mentor in this business is important?
Yeah. 100%. I think the last time I was here, we talked about this, and,
Yeah.
and I still will back that up, saying that, if you can find one person or one restaurant that you really feel at home at, and the people that you work with are like-minded, and you really connect with what they're trying to achieve, and you work as a team together, and maybe there's one person there that really wants to take you under their wings, so to speak, like that is a relationship that can totally change your destiny. And although Alice she wasn't in the kitchen day in, day out, I still got to know her. I got to understand the philosophy, and I got to work with some really brilliant cooks. So I'm lucky to be able to think of her as a mentor, but there were so many other people in my journey that became mentors that were just great cooks, great people, and I took all the lessons and tried to absorb them.
So after Chez Panisse, what happened? Where did you go?
So after Chez Panisse, I didn't really know if I was going to leave California. Maybe I would go back home. I'm originally from the East Coast of the U.S. And then it was a bit of like an off-chance kind of comment from a friend about coming to Australia. And I met Justin Hems, who's the owner of Maryvale, and we really hit it off. He's someone who loves great, simple food, and I cooked a meal for him, and he really enjoyed it enough to say, why don't you come out and we'll open this restaurant together? And that was eventually Fred's. It took a few years, but it was a leap of faith.
How old were you then, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 29.
Okay, so it's fairly young, isn't it?
It was pretty quick for me, I got to say. I'm sometimes envious of cooks that started earlier in their lives and like Maggie said, knew that that's what they wanted to do. I mean, I was still pretty young, but I think there was a few years there where I probably could have done with a little bit more, like just basic, simple, from the ground up learning. And it was mostly I had to just jump in and learn, like thrown into the fire.
That's
really.
sometimes not a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, I mean, for me it worked, but I think for some people it's different. Like, you either have to be taught things step by step, or you're someone that really thrives on spontaneity and sort of like sinking or swimming.
Mm. So we all know the hours are long, and sometimes the money's not great in our industry. How do you sort of, how did you cope with when those long hours were there and the high stress and
Oh, look, and I still struggle with those things. It's not like, that is really changing, but I agree. I think it's so much about loving what you do. And I always knew that it would... I love the process, but I always knew that I would get somewhere where it would feel worth it. And it would feel like, the sacrifice and the dedication and the long hours, away from family and friends and missing holidays and that kind of thing would feel like... there was a point to all of it. And I feel that way now in my career, and I don't ever worry about, feeling overwhelmed or exhausted, because I do love it. And even if you do get that overwhelmed or exhausted, it's okay to take, a step aside and come back to it. And that's what I do.
So, for young people here, what's your take on, there's no food critics in the room, but what's your take on food critics, reviewers, striving for chef's hats, awards and things like that? Is it a really important thing? Should people stress out about it? Should they? Look,
it is important, but I would say if you spend too much time worrying about it, or if you make the focus of what you do that, you're probably never going to achieve anything. I think the greatest thing is just to love what you do and try to make it as good as you can. And the great reviews and the critics and the awards, I believe, will come if that's what you're doing. And don't really focus on like trying to achieve those things. Focus on trying to do something beautiful.
The toughest day you've had in the business?
Oh my God, I actually had it last week, which is
wow.
kind of this is a good moment to talk about it. But I just had one of those days where, like, everything that could go wrong went wrong. I'm currently in the process of writing my first book, which is a huge honor. I can't believe I get to do it, but it's quite overwhelming. And I was at the restaurant. We were so busy, and I was at the pass, and I had to like kind of just hold myself up for a minute because it all just got a bit too much. But, went outside, took a deep breath. And this is where like having good supportive people around you is so important. And I work with a great team of chefs, who, I like to see that the days of kind of the aggressive kitchens are, I think, passing us, which is really good. And I work in a team of really lovely people. And I think when any of us is having one of those days now, we can really rely on each other to, get through anything that might feel a little bit overwhelming. And that's a really good change in the industry that I think
it is
happening.
So talking about your bad day, and I'm sure there's been plenty, which these guys are going to go through. How do you, get through those times of the long hours, the money's not great, I'm sick of this job, I'm going to go do something else?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember too that this is not just a problem of like this industry. I think there's many other careers where you can work yourself to the bone and not earn enough money or whatever. And I do believe that this industry, it's not all like that. It's not always like that. If you're dedicated and you love it, you will go past that point to where you can earn a great wage. It can give you so much, like the ability to travel. I knew that cooking for me was something that was going to take me places, and I really, really believed in that. And it's happened. So there's so much great that comes out of it. You just got to stick with it. But I think surrounding yourself with like-minded, decent people is key to getting there.
Is there anyone with a question for Danielle? Yes?
Yes. Hi.
What do you feel is the biggest difference between Australian and
I don't know that there's such a huge difference. I think, the question was the difference between American and Australian cuisine. There's not so many big differences, but I think it's really interesting, like subtleties around like how, Americans like to eat versus how Australians like to eat. And I think there is, a great sophistication to the dining public in Australia that maybe don't quite get in the States quite as much. So that's a really great thing. And I think Australians really like kind of the simple, beautiful produce, and that's still something that I think is being accepted in the US, but maybe only in like major cities as much. And of course, I really would love to see the end of like, heavily sugared and processed foods and all of that. So I think Australians, we all have those things in both of our cultures, but I think here there's a bit more of a focus on wholesome, natural ingredients.
So you've got one of the best restaurants in the country. You're about to release a cookbook. Where do you go from here? Like you've worked up this ladder, as hopefully everyone will do here. Not, whether we get to your level or not, but where do you go from here?
I don't really have a plan. I sort of.
Maggie didn't have a plan, and
so
you don't have a plan.
maybe there's something to this whole throwing out the plan thing. Again, I like to think that all of these things lead to other things, and that's been my experience so far. I've definitely, even though, for example, that's the book that I've always wanted to write a book. When the opportunity came to me, I thought I'm 100% not ready to do this, but I still knew I had to say yes. And I think, sometimes pushing yourself a little bit beyond your comfort zone and saying yes to something even when you think you're not quite ready leads you onto other bigger and better things. And that's been a pretty key lesson, which I don't know where I picked that up from, but I just knew I was willing to take risks. And at this point in my life, I'm willing to, take on things as they come.
Going back to that beautiful roast chicken I had, which was incredibly simple because it was with fennel, if I remember, and perfectly roasted. How do you get to a dish? How do you create a dish on your menu?
Well, I think because the basis of the food at Fred's is so closely tied to the farms that we work with, we often start with what they're sending to us. They tell us what's growing, what's good, and that informs the rest of the menu. So, that chicken was, a beautiful, beautiful organic chicken that we had gotten in as a sample, actually. So, we were trying to figure out how we were going to put it on the menu. But it starts always with the ingredient, 100%. I never start with like an idea and then try to work backwards. We get all the things in the room, we know what's coming in, and then we work with what we have.
Beautiful. So your piece of advice to these guys, thinking maybe going in the industry, what would it be?
I would probably say it's to really appreciate these first few years that you have in the industry and try to absorb as much as you can. It's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but just stick with me.
No, that's good.
And also, as I said before, find the group of people that do what you love and really get into that. And then, once you've done all your time learning, don't be afraid to have your own vision for something. Because ultimately, no one is going to get excited about someone who just goes on and does what someone else did. Instead, try to create your own magic a little bit.
Well, here's a question then. Fred's, that I'm sure was a vision of Justin and yourself. I mean,
yeah, well, together,
how did that evolve?
And a lot of hugely inspired by my time at Chez Panisse.
Yeah.
But I think the cool thing about once you get your own opportunity to do something that you can put your stamp on is now it can evolve and now it can sort of become the cook that I'm becoming, because I'm still very much in my early days, I like to think. So it can eventually change, but without never changing the spirit of what it is, which is really focused on the ingredients, simple, beautiful, the kind of food you'd want to have at home.
Wonderful. Any more questions before we wrap things up? Yes?
I don't actually. No, I'm an employee of Maryville, but Maryville, like as a model, is quite interesting in that the owner, Justin, is really... he really wants to develop the concept with someone who will then take it and own it and run it like it is mine. So, although it's kind of great, I get the best of both worlds. I don't have the financial responsibility of running that business, but I do get to creatively own the whole thing.
Is it your vision, perhaps one day, to have a restaurant? Would you, for young people, do you think it's better for them to stay working for someone, have that goal to go out and do their own thing?
I think
Everyone's different, I guess.
I think that's totally a question to each one of you one day. I'm not someone who started out from the beginning saying, I want to have my own business. And in this case, it really is giving me a great lesson in all of the business aspects of things, not just the cooking, but I get to see how financially a business runs.
Because everyone thinks it can be just about food and writing menus. It's
very much not.
Wages.
Especially if you work with, people who expect certain results on things. So wages, cost management, revenue, all that stuff is something I really had to learn in the last 2.5 years, and definitely learning on the job. But it's been a really great lesson. And to be honest, I'm not sure it means that one day I want to have my own restaurant. But, for now, I'm quite happy to run Fred's.
Wow, beautiful. Well, a big round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so